Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
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 Cool. Well, thank you all for making it on time, and obviously much earlier in Saudi than it is in Dubai. So we really appreciate that. Today we have a fun session with our Content Factory gang, which you will get to know even more intimately as this program progresses. But today we're going to be tackling a little bit more on the brand equity, building your brand equity, content, and a lot of the strategies that you guys should be taking into consideration when moving forward with building your beautiful fashion and accessory brands. So everybody knows everybody, so there's no need for introductions this time around. So I will definitely leave the rest of the time to Danielle to do her thing. Go, Dan.
All right, cool. Well, good morning, everyone. I know it's really early for you guys, so thank you for waking up early. And I promise this will be fun, so it's not going to be too serious. What's up, Mo? Oh,
Mo has a question already?
I thought it was a question. I think it's just hello.
Why did you start drinking coffee?
And thank you guys so much for last week. I heard from the videographer and the team that you guys had a great day filming and doing your interviews. So thank you for that. We're definitely going to create some cool content with that for you guys. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to share my screen and we can start. So today we're going to kind of like touch upon a few different subjects, like mostly concerning branding and how to express your brand on social. And then just touching upon a little bit of creating a content strategy. So part of the program is that we will be offering you guys some services, including those services. Something that we've identified that we are probably going to be offering you guys is a content strategy. I know that when we all individually spoke, there was a lot of pain points around social and what to post and how to kind of like structure your content. So I think this is something that we're going to be working on collectively. But at the same time, when it comes to your brand and your branding documents, I think this is something that's like super important. So we're going to kind of take you through some of the things that you should have. And then in the second part, we'll do like a small workshop to kind of get the juices flowing. But we will leave that part with you guys as well, of course, because I'm sure you'll want to take some time to think about it. And then you can submit to us all of those branding elements and we can put them together in a document for you. So yeah, that's kind of just what we're going to go over today. I'm just going to turn off my camera because I can see myself. It's a bit distracting. Okay, so the first part we're going to talk about is your brand identity. So for all of you guys, you've created beautiful brands. I think now is the time to always make sure that you have a very clear brand identity as your brands grow, as you find your brands in different touch points. It's always important to have kind of like your branding locked down and communicated with not only the customer, but with also anyone that you're kind of like working with. To make sure that your brand essence is kind of like always maintained no matter where your brand is found. Okay. Oh, just 1 second. Sorry, I actually can't see. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So why is brand identity so important? So of course, the first thing that's the most important about your brand identity is that it's really the first impression of your customer. So I know it's very shallow to say, but like it is all about how things look and how things are put together. And so the first impression is very important. So how does your logo look like? How do your bags look like? How is your brand presented? In what kind of universe? This really gives like a first impression to the customer. And that's kind of like the most important moment. This is when a customer is either going to be interested or kind of just like not really notice and look away. So it's really important to find a way to make your brand stand out from the crowd. And it's really kind of like your reputation builder when we look at the brand identity. You really want to kind of like intrigue people. You want to be memorable and you want to be different. So you need to kind of like come up with these small icons or slogans or colors that really like catch people from far away. Like for example, if you're walking in the mall and you see an orange bag from very far away, automatically you know that that's like Hermes. If you see a small blue bag, you know that that's Tiffany. So like all of these kind of small signatures are things that are very important to a brand. Of course, it doesn't have to be a color, it can be an icon, but it's definitely something that makes your brand kind of stand out from the crowd and make it super memorable. Um, what's very cool about all of you is that you all have a very unique brand story. I think all of your stories are very cool, and it's important to showcase them and give them kind of like the face that they deserve for your audience, because people will remember these kind of compelling stories, especially nowadays after the past few years. I feel like customers are much more emotional. Customers are also much more sensible. I think now no one is really giving into kind of like fast fashion anymore. Everyone is much more into sustainability or brands that stand for something, brands that have a story. So the more that you express your story, the more that your audience is kind of going to become hooked or kind of going to be connected to this story. So finding ways to kind of reveal that brand story is super important. And the good news for all of you guys is that you do have really nice stories. So once you've kind of defined all of that, being consistent is also really important, just so that you can kind of establish that identity. So even if you keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again, if you have an icon and you're plastering it everywhere, that's kind of what you have to do. You should be as consistent as possible and kind of like scream it out there as much as you can so that people can already start remembering and engaging. So 3 kind of like pillars that we really believe in when building your brand is, of course, to be unique. So when you're working on your branding, being unique is very difficult in such a saturated market, that's for sure. But perhaps when you're building your branding, when you're building your logo or your identity, if you're coming up with patterns or you know, some kind of like offset logo, like try and make sure that that's something that's created custom. So perhaps you could partner with an illustrator, or you could draw something yourself, but having a symbol or patterns or something that is unique will really help your brand kind of like stand out from the rest. Of course, to tell a story. So dig deep for your brand story and have it come to life through your identity. Again, I think this is something that a lot of you guys are already doing in a great way, and you should keep pushing as much as you can. And then captivate people. So captivating an audience, it's always more about the visuals. So you want to have catchy colors, patterns, fonts. You want to really be like captivating in the way that you're expressing your brand. So anytime you're creating a piece of content, or if you're going into a shoot, or if you're any kind of like form of visual expression, you really want to ask yourself, like, am I captivating people here? Am I doing something different? Do I have my signature in this piece of content? So that when you kind of release this content into the world, automatically people will recognize it and they'll become kind of more attached to it. So when you're building your brand, kind of like the first step before you work on the visuals, I know all of you are already past this stage, but it's good to kind of just go over the process with you all, is really creating like a strong brand platform. So a lot of times we meet a lot of brands which they have not done this exercise. A lot of times your brand identity is super clear to you, but maybe it's not clear to other people. So kind of having it down in paper, doing some exercises to really dig deep and see what is your brand story, who is your brand, and what do you stand for. These are exercises that are very important to do so that you can see it out there on paper, and then anyone else can kind of understand what it is that you're trying to do. So whenever we look at creating a brand platform, we really look at kind of like defining your vision, your mission, your values, and your brand story. Once those are defined, it's very easy for other people to understand what your brand is all about. So there's kind of like 5 key things that we like to do for the brand platform, which is creating a word cloud, having a mission statement, defining what you are, defining what your values are, and what is your personality as a brand. So at the second part of the session, we'll just do some exercises to start thinking about all of these points. And then I will send you guys the questions and the prompts so that you can also take this offline and work on it if it's not an exercise that you've already done. So after the brand platform is, of course, your branding checklist. So this is much more technical, I would say. These are more your visual brand guidelines. Again, these are very important to make sure that your collateral is always consistent. If other people are using your brand or managing your brand, they have very clear guidelines to abide by. So for example, if you find yourself in a multi-brand store, you want to make sure that your section is very clearly defined as per your brand guidelines. The logo is printed in the correct way. The colors that are expressed are correct, fonts, all those kind of things. So it's important to have all of these in a document. So you want to have a mood, your logo, icons, colors, fonts, and applications. So we actually created a fake brand just to show you how this kind of document could look like. Again, probably some of you guys have this already, maybe others don't, but it is very important to have it all kind of in a nice brand book. So for our fake brand, it's called the Fashion Factory. We kind of just wanted to show you how to express those guidelines. So we start off with a mood board. So this is always kind of just giving a feeling of what your brand represents, just visually, so that, you know, as you get into the document, you kind of have a clear vision on what is this brand, what inspired us to start this brand from a visual perspective. After that, we go into the branding assets. So you have your logo. So you'll always have kind of like your primary logo, which is, in this case, it's a word mark. So it's just the word Fashion Factory. It's also important, especially in the region here, to have a dual logo, whether you use the logo in just Arabic or just in English or them together. Just on a side note, this is not a very great example. Like, we were just a little bit pressed for time with the presentation, but here you can clearly see that the English logo has a very specific kind of design aesthetic. And in the Arabic logo, it's just been kind of like written in a font. This is not something we would recommend. We would recommend to try and hand draw the logo to match the English one as much as possible and make it quite clearly defined. But this is just for the sake of illustrative purposes. So having a dual logo is important here in the region. And then here you want to show different ways that the logo can be expressed. So whether it's white on black or black on white, if you have some other kind of like color combinations that the logo can be represented in, it's important to identify that. And then an icon. An icon is always something interesting to have, especially if you're working in fashion and accessories, because this is something that you can have on your labels, or that you can emboss on the soles of the shoes, or you can have it within a design even. So having an icon that is kind of offset by your logo is something that's very interesting. You can also use it on a lot of print applications if you wanted to make stickers, or if you wanted to kind of have flyers. Like, having a cool icon like this is great. And also on social for your little icon, you know, your Instagram icon, it's cool to have an icon versus the full word logo. So this is something that we recommend a lot of designers to do. If you haven't already done it, it could be an interesting exercise to have your own icon. And then in this case, we looked at different shapes. So for example, when we were creating this brand, we were imagining that whenever the brand is expressed, it would always have these kind of more like fluid forms that are more circular, not very angular. So this is something worth mentioning in your guidelines. When it comes to colors, so we always like to have a broad color universe. You want to have at least 12, 15 different colors that your brand can have to express itself. So here you can see the full color palette. And then what we do is define 4 primary.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So what I learned from branding about earlier, that like the brand has to have primary color and secondary color, and then there's the color palettes. But the color palette does not
Yes.
represent the brand all the way, right? It's just for inspiring,
No,
designing, direct.
exactly.
Okay, okay.
Exactly. And like you can kind of look at this as like it's a very ugly word, but it's more like your corporate branding. Like your brand itself has its identity, but that in no way means that like from season to season you're not working with a different color palette, because of course this is going to kind of like really limit your creativity when it comes to designing. So this is more like when your brand, let's say for example, if you're building a pop-up and you have shopping bags and tags, all of those things live within these color universes that is your corporate branding. But then when it comes to your brand on a campaign by campaign basis, of course, each one of those has their own stories with their own color palettes. And when you're expressing them, you don't need to limit yourself to this color palette. This is much more for a brand identity that's everlasting. Again, like if you're creating boxes and things like that, you will refer more to your corporate color palette. But then when you're looking at designing and collections and marketing and campaigns, each one of those can have their own story and their own color palette and universe. I don't know if that makes sense the way that I explained it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah? Okay, cool. So yeah, these are, and also these rules are not there to kind of like, you don't need to follow them to a T. It's just to kind of have like a framework around your brand. So here, for example, we define what the 4 primary colors are. The reason why we have like a wider color palette here is because if you were to just have these 4 color palettes, it's very limiting. If you're on social and you want to use a background that's beige, but you only have one beige to choose from, it's very limiting. So at least here you have a variety of colors to choose from. You have your primary, and your primary ones can always be inspired by something. It could be inspired by, I don't know, the green that comes from a palm tree or a beige that comes from a sand. So it's always nice to connect the colors with a kind of like a texture or an inspiration behind your brand that's very important to you. As you can see here, what we did. So here we identify the primary colors, and then you have the secondary colors. And then of course you have your fonts. So with fonts, we always like to choose at least 2 font pairings. You can have also 3 if you like. So here we've identified 2 different fonts, and this is how they kind of like look together. So you have one of them that's a more bold kind of header font, and the other one that's a body copy. And then you kind of like take all of that and we start looking at formats. So for example, taking all of those branding elements that we've identified and putting it together into some kind of like flyer or an invitation or a lookbook. This is kind of combining all of those brand pieces that we've identified in the guidelines. And this is always nice to have, like, how can we express it on social? So here you see we've used the circular forms, we've used the color palette, we've kind of used the arches, and a very similar kind of like look and feel and mood that we had previously in our mood board. So here it's a great way to kind of like, of course, you don't have to be as strict, but you can already pre-make some templates that matches your brand identity. For example, you can have a templates for sale. You could have templates for new collections. You can have a template that showcases one specific piece. And these are things that you can identify in your brand book. So that's kind of it for the first part. Did you guys have any questions about the brand platform or the graphic chart? No? Okay, perfect. So next we'll move on to kind of like expressing your brand image on social. So for a lot of you guys and most brands out there right now, social is like one of the key advertising platforms. It's kind of like the way that everyone is expressing their brand. It's not very often now that you see brands getting billboards outside or doing, in-mall advertising. A lot of things are happening on social. So it's very important to have your brand image be super clear on social, translated on social, and also to have a variety of the different types of content that you put there onto social to express your brand and to keep the audience kind of engaged. So we're kind of just going to go through some examples that are really cool of what some brands are doing and how they express their brand on social. Again, it's always important to think of different types of content formats. Like we don't want to use our social to only be displaying products or to only be displaying campaign images. You know, it's nice to have a variety and use that brand story that you've identified to express itself onto social. So thinking of a variety of different types of content that you can do that's going to be engaging with the audience, but it's also going to be expressing what your brand values are. So these are kind of like 3 key pillars that we really believe in when you're thinking about your brand image on social. The first one is to think social. So always, whenever you're using social media, it's important to think in the mind of like, if you're on Instagram, what are people going to want to see on Instagram? What kind of content is social friendly? So it's much more like snackable content, social friendly content. Whenever you're on each platform, you should think natively in the language of that platform and create content that is made for that channel specifically. And then, of course, you always want to tell a story. So social is a great place to express your brand story. You always want to kind of have this underlying narrative for your brand expression. A great way to do that is to kind of create sometimes an editorial calendar. What do you want to be talking about on a monthly basis? What are some different subjects? So for example, if your brand is very much into streetwear, what is the kind of narrative that we can constantly be talking about on a kind of like always on level, that we're telling a story? So are we at the forefront of talking about sorry, I lost my words here. Basically, we should have an editorial calendar where we are telling a story and positioning ourselves in a specific way. So if you guys are a streetwear brand, you want to be covering trends and what's in, and kind of having like a narrative that is entertaining for your audience and that's kind of positioning you guys as an expert in this specific field. So it's important to always have this kind of like storytelling aspect to what you have on your social channel. And then the third part is all about experimentation. We're very lucky this day and age. Well, it's kind of a blessed curse, but there's so much content that's going out on a daily basis that viewers are looking at, that it's okay to experiment. It's okay to try something that's maybe a little bit outside of your comfort zone or outside of your brand identity. Maybe it's something a little bit different, but you shouldn't be scared to experiment, because it will only live on social for very long. You know, like we're constantly posting, we're constantly being shown content. If you experiment with something and maybe the audience doesn't react very well or they don't really like it, it's okay, because you're posting on a daily basis. There's a lot of content going out there. It's okay to try some different things, because you'll also be surprised in what works. Sometimes you'll be really surprised to see your audience is engaging and reacting a lot with one piece of content that maybe you thought wasn't going to perform very well. So testing, experimenting, trying different formats, seeing what your audience likes is something that you shouldn't be afraid to do. And actually, we always suggest to do it. So I will let Christina take over, because she has sourced some of these cool examples of brands that do interesting things on social within fashion to express themselves. Christina, are you here?
Hey guys.
Christina is our art director, for those who don't know. Okay, I'll let you start with Chanel.
So yeah, we're gonna show you what some brands are doing on social. And we're starting with Chanel. So they have very original content that keeps on changing. So per collection or per what they want to say. They always start by showing their collection and what they have in store, but they also have very original content where they do very cool things with typography, with images, and bold statements. So as you can see, it's never in the same look and feel in a way. So it's always different, even though it stays within its brand, but per collection, they always change. It's always ownable and unique in a way. So creative content, and they also have different tools. So depending on your brand, if it makes sense. So here, they have playlists, and they also have a different way of feeding us information. So they have informative videos that are very unique and original. So they kind of do a collage vibe to show us and to tell us the story of Chanel. And they also have interviews. So the more you can interest the viewer, the better, in different ways.
Okay.
So Gucci, they have the art of storytelling. So whenever you look at the picture for Gucci, it tells a whole story. They promote talent. Also, they keep promoting talent. So this is something that they do on social. They also have short, I don't know if you've seen these short movies that they have, but it's all about storytelling. So every episode is about something where they show their brand and also talk about something specific. And they have filters. So we always adapt to what's in. So for example, now it's like Reels and TikToks. At some point it was about Instagram filters and so on and so forth. La Comédie also is a brand that have a very unique way of portraying their brand. They so here it's like they play with their images instead of just like posting an image of a shoot. They always have fun with them. They also add graphics. And they also have statements in between what they show. So it's not about only showing the brand itself and what you want to sell. It's about what you want to say and how you want to say it. Azra. So the Azra uses her surroundings. So she plays a lot with the overall mood of the place. And also it's all about creativity. So it's not only about shooting products as is, it's always about thinking how is the best way for me to show my product and a creative way to show it. And also playing with, here it's like playing with photography, but playing, designing it also, just not posting it as is. So it's always better to have a special touch when portraying something.
So yeah, that's it from the examples. Do you guys have any questions about these specific examples that we shared? I mean, what's interesting about all of these examples, of course, Chanel and Gucci are kind of like the international, but both La Comedy and Azra are local. So we kind of just wanted to show different ways that you can express your brand on social, think about different things. For example, how Chanel does playlists, or Gucci has IGTV series. Like, this is something that your audience will always keep coming back to. And then, of course, with our local brands, the way that they're expressing their brands is very unique, and it does stand out from the crowd when we look at other brands and what they're doing. So using all of these small creative flares when you're expressing your brand on social can be very cool, and it can be a great way to kind of portray your specific brand story.
I have one question.
Yeah, of course.
Have you like did a content for a local brand that talks to Arab? Like, do you have a different way to talk to them than international brands? Like, is there a specific way to just do the content for them because they're like little different?
I mean, honestly, something that I've noticed, especially in the past couple of years, especially because a lot of international brands are localizing themselves, and we're having a very like big uprise in local brands that are coming from the region. One thing that I've noticed is at the beginning, for them, localization was just about Arabization. So whenever they were looking at local brands, they were kind of like just doing everything only with an Arabic language. But I think right now that's kind of not the case anymore. I think that the taste and the appetite and the exposure that the consumers here in the region have to content, I think it's important to kind of like be in line with what's happening on like an international standard, and just finding a way to kind of like localize it, but not in a cheesy way. So when we're talking about localizing the content, it doesn't mean that we're just going to write something in Arabic or we're going to translate it from English to Arabic. It's really about embracing the surroundings that we have. So the landscape is something that is very important and cool. And especially in Saudi, you guys have beautiful landscapes that are very unique to you. But maybe when you're shooting in a unique landscape in somewhere local, you still kind of have this more like international flair in terms of like the way that the video is being shot or the way that the pictures are being shot. Let's say, for example, if you wanted to do a quote on social, instead of just coming up with an English one and translating it to Arabic, it's really finding like those nuances that are like relevant in the Arabic language. And so, yeah, thinking local, it should never just be about taking something international and translating it. It's really about establishing your identity from your roots, but kind of like remixing it into like a modern way. I think a lot of brands also play a lot on nostalgia, which is amazing, you know, so like we all grew up in the Middle East, like what are things that we can use that kind of like is so unique to the region and identifies ourselves from being from here. But then in terms of the look and feel, like a great example could be with beauty. So before, it was very trendy for Arabic beauty to be like very intense makeup with an intense black eye and like smoky eyes and henna, and like this was something that was like very typical of how people would portray beauty in the Middle East. Whereas now it's a different story, you know, like we do have a unique look and feel, but we are still in line with kind of what's happening on an international level. And actually we can be at the forefront of like what's trending. So I think being as authentic as you can is really the best way to go about it. And kind of embracing your surroundings and using all of these nuances in your brand storytelling. I hope that made sense. In my
Yeah,
mind,
thank you.
I don't know if it makes sense, but yeah. I think it's all about being authentic, because you have a lot of the brands who are like maybe the international brands that come to the region, and it seems very inauthentic because all they do is kind of like translate something. So maybe it could be like a very European model, a looking model who's standing in the middle of a New York City, and they just changed the text to Arabic. For me, this is not localized content. Like we are not connecting with this picture at all, you know. It's in New York and it's a very European model, and just the text is in Arabic. Whereas now brands are starting to really see the importance of localizing it. Basically, they should have a more Arabic looking model that's maybe in a location that is somewhere within our own region, and then have Arabic copy on top. So this is kind of like where we should really think about being as authentic as possible. So yeah. So next is to kind of think social. So we just kind of wanted to give you guys some inspirations on what kind of content or what kind of like creative medium works well on social. That's maybe a bit different than just, you know, imagery or graphics. So something that we love to see on social is collage. I think that if you were to take a simple e-com picture that maybe you've used for your website, but then if you start layering on top of it patterns, colors, graphics, it kind of transforms the image into something that is very colorful and eye-catching. And definitely if you're on social, this is the type of content that we would call thumb stopping. Like it kind of makes you stop and look at it twice, because it's very artistic and interesting in the way that it's being expressed. And this is something very easy for a lot of people to do. I mean, easy as in if you have a background in graphic design or if you work with a graphic designer, because this is where you can easily recycle content. Like if you have your e-com pictures, you can use those same pictures, but kind of remixed specifically for social. Here are some other examples of collage. So here, you know, you kind of have like the cut paste kind of feel where you can put different elements together. And these are also really great when it comes to storytelling. So when we talk about storytelling, it doesn't mean that you have to have a caption that's like an essay. Maybe you were doing a collection and the collection was inspired by this specific color palette and flowers and jewels. And this is a great way to express what the inspiration was without having to kind of say it. It's more like showcasing it. So this is a lot of stuff that you can do with like your mood boards whenever you're creating a new collection. Maybe you can take elements from your mood board and turn them into some artworks that you can express on social. As well here, again, this is something where you can either take your lookbook pictures or your e-com pictures, but then kind of layer them with different kind of backgrounds and cutouts to kind of make them seem more interesting or more social friendly. Of course, one thing that we believe in a lot in social is movement. So creating kind of like GIFs, these are really great ways to have your audience kind of like intrigued by the piece of content, looking at it. It's almost like a piece of art in itself. And on social, anything that has movement performs really well. So you can look at creating some different type of GIFs. Here we have some cool psychedelic things that will definitely make the audience stop for a second and try and understand what's happening. Again, all of these can be made from recycled content. So any kind of like photography that you have on of your model can be used in many different ways. You could make a collage, you could make a GIF, you can play with different patterns. This is also a good example of if you have a specific mood board or fabrics that you've been using for your collection, how can you use them in an interesting way to kind of showcase the storytelling behind it? Here it's being a bit creative and fun. So finding creative ways to make things move. In this picture here, it's actually just two collages that are intertwining with themselves, but they're making a very cool piece of art. Another kind of interesting, and honestly, I think it's an underrated format, is the cinematograph. So this is when you have kind of like a still picture, but only one part is moving. I think it's very cool to use for fashion if you have like a specific feeling that you want to get through. So for example, here, like the designer really wanted to show the movement of the fabric that you can have in the breeze. It feels like very romantic. And when you're looking at the picture versus when it's still, you can really see the difference in like the mood that it creates behind this piece of content. Again, here it's cool. You know, they use the cinematograph to kind of identify a specific part of the outfit. So here they have like the strong shoulder pads. So having this movement was something that really kind of emphasizes this part of the garment. This one is a little bit creepy, but I just thought it was cool. So I added it here, but it's creepy, just their eyes are moving. So this kind of gives this eerie kind of vibe, something that kind of catches you a little bit off guard and makes it a little bit memorable. It's kind of whimsical, I would say. So yeah, any questions on those formats? Have we gotten you a little bit inspired?
I have a question. So for the GIFs and for the cinematograph, what kind of like apps have you used for that?
At the end of the presentation, I have some apps there, but they were not specific to the cinematograph, but there is a specific app that you can download that creates a cinematograph. For the GIFs, there are specific apps you can use, but the more intricate ones would be done with a designer, usually with like a graphic designer. So maybe you could partner with a graphic designer and feed them with a lot of those materials. and they can come up with different GIFs for you. But with a Cinemagraph, you can do it directly from an app. So there are a lot of shortcuts that you can do with apps. And actually, maybe before I send this presentation, I'll add more in, because we do have some that you'll see in a small later part of the presentation, but I didn't include Cinemagraph, but I'll add it in there. Because it's amazing a lot of the stuff that you can do with apps these days. So yeah, I will share those with you for sure.
Perfect.
Okay, cool. So I'll move on to the content strategy. This is Rafi's favorite part because he thinks I always repeat myself because I haven't.
I've just seen this too many times, but it's
Yeah.
very relevant.
Yeah, so building a content strategy. So apart from the creative side of working in kind of like this agency and doing shoots and all things like that, it's all great. But if you don't have a content strategy behind your brand, it can be very overwhelming. And actually a lot of the messages can get lost. So kind of having a framework at the beginning is super helpful to kind of like set up the type of content that you'll be creating for the year and why you're doing it, what are the objectives behind them. And then upkeeping the content on a monthly basis is quite easy because you've already kind of defined what you're doing and why you're doing it. So it becomes much more kind of like executional instead of kind of a creative exercise every month or every day or every week. You're like, oh, what should we post on social now? So if you have this kind of like content strategy in place, it really helps with the executional part of social and content in general. So content marketing, especially now, is very key in your brand journey. Like I was saying before, like we're exposed to so much content on a daily basis that it's very important that you have a very clear reason why you're creating the content you're creating and what are the objectives behind them. Because of course, not only does it express your brand story and express who you are, but even from a commercial standpoint, nowadays, the content is very important. So when you're creating content that is for performance, these are things that can lead to direct sales or website visits, which are very important for you to have, especially when you're a brand that can be found online. Maybe you're in limited retailers. Maybe you want to push people to go to the retailers. So the content is very important. It's a very important marketing technique these days. You definitely want to make sure that the content that you're creating is valuable, relevant, consistent. It's really there to kind of like attract and acquire a specific type of audience. And of course, you do want to drive like a profitable customer action. So it's important to, when you're creating the content, also defining what the objectives are. Maybe you're doing a piece of content and the objective behind it is much more about expressing your brand values or telling your brand story. So that typically could be images that are coming from a campaign. But then if you want to create a piece of content that's about selling an item, it's very important to show the item very clearly. In the captions, you want to talk about what makes this so unique, what are the special traits of this product, and you want to have a call to action behind it. This is a piece of content that is really made to drive sales. So you also have to be very clear with what your objective is behind each piece of content, and then creating the content to adapt to that specific KPI. What's amazing about content and your content strategy is that it really does help with kind of the art of storytelling and social connectivity. So these days, that's something that's very important. Everyone is glued to their phone, and you want them to kind of feel connected to something. So using content marketing to do that is very important because you're approaching the consumer on a very emotional and personal level. So content marketing is very important for so many different reasons, but the two main ones is really about kind of like the storytelling and the captivating the audience, but then also using it for commercial purposes in a very smart way. So that's why having a content strategy in place is very important at the beginning of the year, or whenever it is that you create one, but to kind of clearly define all of those key moments, all of those key stories, and how you're going to support those with content. So when we kind of look at the buying cycle, traditional advertising and marketing was always kind of like the third and fourth phase of the cycle in general. At the beginning, you kind of have awareness and then research. So in the awareness phase, maybe the consumer is thinking, oh, by the way, I think I need a new bag. And then the second part is researching, okay, what kind of bag do I want to get? Then consideration and buying is where like your traditional marketing will come into play. But what's cool about content marketing is that it kind of is at the beginning of the cycle, which is something new in advertising. So for example, like maybe I never thought I needed a bag until I kept seeing an influencer wearing this bag and now I really want it. So now I'm going to do some research about it. So in these parts, this is not where you're going to be like, seeing a traditional advertising. It's more something that happened very organically through the art of content and storytelling. So captivating your audience in like this kind of mind frame is very important. Um, Especially the research part, so like if someone says, oh, I think I want a bag, I want my bag to be by a sustainable brand, I want to make sure that that brand is local. These are all kind of like research points, and if your brand talks to those points, it's important to make sure that this is something that will come up in their research. So doing Google ads is important. Maybe having a blog on your website where you answer some of those questions. These are all kind of like important things that you can have into play, that when someone is researching for a specific product, yours would pop up somehow. When we look at building the content strategy, this is the slide that Rafi loves the most. We always like to have it in line with your marketing strategy. So before we go into this, you kind of have like your marketing strategy or your business strategy in place for the year. So identifying, okay, when are my collections going to come out? What are those peak periods? If you're doing a capsule or a collaboration that falls in March, and then in June you have a summer collection coming out, this is all going to be part of like your marketing and business strategy that will help create your content strategy. So identifying key moments, key events, when collections are going to drop, any kind of like important dates for your brand. So for example, Saudi National Day is important. So having your marketing calendar, your business calendar, and really looking at the year and when those peak times are is something that you have to do before you go into the content strategy. So once we have this kind of like map of when things are happening, what is the level of their importance, this is when we take it into a content strategy. So how can we support all of those key periods with content? And then with the content, you kind of have your three levels. You have the hero, the hub, and the hygiene. So your hero content is really like the large scale campaigns that you're going to be doing, the big brand moments that are produced purely most of the time to raise brand awareness and communicate your brand positioning. So in these hero pieces of content, maybe it's like a very beautiful storytelling video that features your new collection. But in this video, you're not screaming like, come buy my products right now. It's much more about the inspiration behind the collection. It's an aspirational type of video. It really positions your brand in a specific way. And usually these would have maybe like a higher production value. So this is something that you're actually investing a little bit into making it big. So it could be when your collections drop, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, you have a hero campaign. It could even be once a year. Whatever it is, but this piece of content, the objective really is to kind of like position your brand in a specific way and tell like a very nice story. What sits in the middle of the pyramid is the hub content. So the hub content is the content that is regularly scheduled and pushed out, that's designed for a very specific KPI. So the hub content always has kind of like more of a commercial objective behind it. So for example, it could be if you're having a sale and you want the viewer to shop now. if you've launched a new collection and you want viewers to discover it right now, if you're having a specific event and you want people to attend. So any kind of like content that needs an action after it, that has like a KPI behind it, this is what you would call your hub content. A lot of the times brands are always nervous to create this type of content because it does need to be pushy. It does need to be like, maybe more salesy. But what we're lucky with nowadays is that you can create that type of content, and maybe it's the type of content that you only use for performance marketing, but you don't have to put it on your actual Instagram reel or on your Facebook page. It's something that is used just for ads, but those ads should be designed in a very specific way to make sure that you get the results that you're looking for. So for example, if you have a sale, it's very important to show the discount, in a flashy, a little bit even sometimes obnoxious way, but it can be designed in a nice way, but you're really pushing a message because you're expecting results and you're investing in that piece of content. So the hub content is really, okay, like when are those periods happening in the year that I need my audience to do something? Again, whether it's to come to an event or check out your website or buy, you create specific type of content that is made to achieve as much as you can good results for that type of content. And then at the bottom of the pyramid, you have your hygiene content. So the hygiene content is something that is always on. It's really designed to like pull your audience into your page. So the hygiene content is, what are you posting on a daily basis? What is the stories that you're telling? Let's say if you have an IGTV series where you're interviewing people, something like that, your audience is coming to your page and they keep scrolling to watch more or learn more. It's something that's on an always on basis. And when you're looking at the content that's on an always on basis, here's where you can play with different types of content that you have. Maybe every month you could have 4 quotes, 4 GIFs, 2 videos that are more like the storytelling type of videos. This is kind of like your always on strategy. And on a monthly basis, maybe you have a different theme that you're talking about, let's say. So this is kind of what we use to identify the key times in the year. What type of content are we going to create to support that moment? And what are we going to be talking about on like an always on basis? Again, it's important to kind of identify a calendar and put themes in there so that you're not stuck. With fashion, it's actually easier than a lot of other industries because you do have your seasons, which is a big storytelling aspect in fashion. So for example, when it's the fall season, maybe you want to be talking about fall trends and fall colors. When it's winter, same thing. There's so many different things that you can cover in fashion to create this calendar to make sure that you always have something that you're talking about. I know that this is a very technical slide, so I hope that the way I explained it makes sense. Does anyone have any questions about it?
How often do you recommend we should do a hero campaign, a year and a half in hygiene? I know it depends on our production plan, but just in general for a startup.
Yeah, I think honestly, like even with a startup, having one is fine, because the idea of the hero content is that it should be everlasting. Like it shouldn't be something that is like just trending for a small period of time. So if you were to create like one very beautiful video that really describes what your brand is about and what your brand is doing, it should be everlasting. So having at least one is very important because you want to be able to tell your brand story. But then also if you have like a big collection that's really important and there's a nice story behind it, you can also produce them in that time. So maybe once is fine. If you can do it more, it's great. But I would only do them when you actually do have a story to tell. Let's say you did a very cool collection that is inspired by, I don't know, a specific place in Saudi because this is where you grew up and you partnered with, I don't know what. And there's something very nice to say. You should do a hero campaign about it. Minimum, you should have one, which kind of expresses your brand in general. And if anybody sees this video, automatically they'll understand what your brand is all about. if you have the luxury of doing it more than once or whenever you have a collection that comes out, I would also recommend to do it then, but always making sure that you are saying something. You know what I mean?
I do have a follow-up question.
Of course.
So if you were to um, plan out the collection, how long before, or what's the kind of time frame that you should be posting a teaser about it? Or
Honestly, this is a very debatable question amongst a lot of people. So the people over at Facebook, they actually don't believe anymore in like teasing phases. The rationale behind that for them is that we're exposed to so much content on a daily basis. Viewers are looking at so much stuff that they're not going to remember that a week ago you teased about this. This is their rationale. This is coming straight from the mouth of Fizo, which I don't know if you guys have met him yet or you will meet him, but he is the creative director over at Facebook. That's his personal view on the matter, right, Rafi? Doesn't believe.
Yeah, so you'll get to speak with Facebook tomorrow morning. And Fizo, I think may or may not be there. He's been working behind the scenes on all of the stuff for you guys, all the content. So you can ask him these questions directly, and we can have a discussion around the teasing content or not. But yes, yeah. That's it.
yeah, but I mean, not necessarily just teasers, but planning out how many times to post, how many times a week, is it daily, is it one post, is it week,
I think it's important to, at minimum, post once a day or once every couple of days. I think 15 posts a month, which is every couple of days, is like really the minimum. For me, I think posting on a daily basis is very important, especially nowadays with with the Instagram algorithm. Posting on a daily basis and including things like reels and stories is very important because Instagram and Facebook, they are a business, and the way that they function is the more that you engage with the app, they reward you with like more exposure. This is just the way that it works. If you stay silent on social and you just post every now and then, they don't really reward you with the type of exposure or algorithm perks that you would if you were to do it on a daily basis, especially now with reels. They're like very interested with people using the platform natively. So like if you're doing reels directly from your phone with a trending music and you're posting on a daily basis, you will have more chances of being exposed by Instagram. But then if you have limited resources and it's just not something that is feasible, I would suggest at least 15 posts a month. But that's when the planning is kind of key because it will help you plan out the month, get on a program like Later where you can kind of auto publish and schedule everything and it kind of runs on its own. So when we're looking at the always on and the daily content, it's really the hygiene, which is more like the storytelling. Maybe you're posting inspirational images or maybe you're posting a quote, kind of like I like to call them filler content. Just to make sure that you keep posting. And then for the hub, I would only recommend that you think about that when you actually have those moments. So whenever you're having sale periods, you would say, oh, okay, at end of July, I'm doing a big sale. I should have at least 3 or 4 pieces of content that are for the sale. Um, and those kind of like just are sandwiched in between your always on strategy. And then when you have a hero campaign, you should leave space for when you're going to post that. But definitely at least every second day, if you can, and you have the resources and you have the manpower to do daily, I would always recommend to do daily. And I would also recommend to think about the formats like posting stories, using tools within the stories that are engaging, like the polls and the quizzes, and then also using new features like reels, videos, different things like that. And you don't need to worry about the content being so polished, because the people who are on social, if we're looking through reels, we're expecting to see content that's made from the phone. We're not expecting to see a campaign that's just been resized into a vertical format. So you don't need to worry too much about the quality. I mean, of course, you want it to look cool and you can be creative with it, but these are things that you can do from your phone in the native like reels or stories language, you know. Um, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think in general stories are kind of easier to post if you want to do it daily. But if we're talking about actual like posts and keeping in line with like a grid or something, it's much
Yeah.
harder to do.
Well, this is something that we're definitely going to be here to help you guys with. So after our one-on-one sessions, we're going to be getting in touch with all of you separately to kind of propose what we want to do with each of your brands. And for all of them, we've included like a mini content strategy with a grid and the content that we use to create this grids, just so that we can kind of like get you started or get you a little bit inspired. And this is something that we'll work on together outside of this boot camp, just kind of like one-on-one. So we'll be here to support you in kind of like coming up with ideas of how you can sustain your grid in the easiest way possible with the resources that you have. So don't worry, this is something that we can work on together, and we're here to help and support and give you all of our ideas and kind of like get you a bit started so that you kind of just can continue to execute it on your own independently after that. Cool. All right, cool. So I'll go to the next slide. So when we look at the 3 key principles, when we look at at content marketing, it's valuable, relevant, and consistent. So when we talk about being valuable, we want the audience to kind of like get something out of it. Either they learn something, or they feel entertained, or we kind of spark some kind of emotion, or we intrigue them in some way. So anything that kind of like sparks an interest or sparks an emotion is what we have to consider when we're looking at the content for it to be kind of valuable. And then relevant, of course. So are we answering the wants, the needs, the interests of the audience? We need to show the audience that we understand them, that we get them, we know what they like. What we're showing them is something relevant. It's not something random. And being consistent. So this also goes back to kind of like your branding. You always want to have a consistent tone, a consistent look and feel, because it makes you kind of like recognizable. You want someone that when they see a piece of content, when they see a photo, directly they're going to associate it to your brand. And the only way that we can do that is to just make sure that everything we're creating is consistent. It doesn't mean that everything has to be copy paste and boring, because then of course the audience will get bored, but just always having kind of like your small touch there, something that people will always kind of recognize is important, so that they can become familiar with your brand. I'm not going to go too much into details with this one, because again, it's like kind of I wouldn't say dry, but it's very I don't know what the word is. But anyways, this is something again that we're going to be doing together offline when we're going to start building your content strategies with you, is defining kind of like what your key objectives are. So what is your objectives of the year? Why are you creating content? What do you want to express and why? Really kind of identifying 2 or 3 objectives that we can follow throughout the year. Defining personas. So this is something that we find very helpful whenever we're looking at creating content, is like, who are we talking to? Like, who are these people? We kind of create some personas. The personas can be based on people who are actually engaging and shopping with your brand, or people who you imagine are going to interact with your brand. So for example, some personas could be, young trendsetter who is obsessed with fashion, kind of knows the ins and outs. She's always looking for what's new, what's hot. That could be one persona. Another persona could be maybe somebody who isn't really sure what their style is, but they want to look cool. How can we talk to them and engage with them? So defining a couple of personas of who you think your shoppers are or could be really helps when you're creating content or doing any kind of like marketing material. It can even help with your design process. Like, would one or two of my personas actually like this? Would they come to this event? Would they engage with this piece of content? Is this relevant for them? Because the audience pool is huge. You could be talking to so many different people. And if you're trying to cater to everyone, your brand identity will get a little bit lost, because you can't have a brand that like speaks to everyone unless you're someone like Apple, for example, which is like a very functional type of brand. So it's important to kind of have these aspirational characters defined in a loose enough way where you could be talking, like you're not talking to too specific of a niche of a target, but you also have an idea of kind of who are these people. It really helps when you're looking at, you know, is this going to appetize them or not? So this is always a fun exercise that we like to do. Selecting your channels, again, is important. So I'm sure for all of you guys, it would be Instagram. But then you can look, okay, is Facebook relevant for my audience? Am I going to go with TikTok or Snapchat? Am I going to do both TikTok and Snapchat? When I'm on Snapchat, what am I going to do? So instead of trying to be on all of the channels and just repeating the content, it's important to pick a couple that you really want to excel in and speak in their language on those, rather than just trying to be everywhere and it's not specific. After that, you want to, you know, look at some areas of focus. So what kind of like formats and subjects are you going to focus on for the year? And it really helps, again, defining the type of content. So I'm going to do GIFs, I'm going to do collages, I'm going to do quotes. These are three things that throughout the year I'm going to do all the time. Just kind of like defining those on paper will also already get the ball rolling and kind of set the scene for the year. So again, you don't feel like too overwhelmed. Defining your marketing moments. So that's something that we spoke about on the previous slide, where we're looking at our calendar. What are those peak times and how are we going to support them through content? And then the last part, of course, is like visualize how this could look. And then it's time to kind of plan. So these are all of the elements that we would be putting together into a content strategy that will then make the rest of the year just kind of more executional on a month-by-month basis. Again, I know it's a lot of information and we have a specific framework for content strategies, which we will be working with you guys on separately to help you in all of these points. Any questions? No? Okay. We thought that this part would be interesting for everyone, which is creating content on a budget. I'm sure all of you guys have budgets and limited budgets. If you have unlimited budgets, that's amazing. If you have limited budgets, that's fine, because there are a lot of ways that you can get creative and crafty when creating content on a budget. So here we just have like some tips. Creating content on a budget is very possible, but planning is key. So we need to kind of like, if you need to be mindful on your spending, but you want to still be impactful with the outcome, we've just put together some small tips on how you could do that. So the first tip is giving something a quick makeover. So if you're on a tight budget, but you need to push out a lot of different messages, you can always kind of dig into your content library, look at past campaigns, recycle and reuse the content. So it should never be a case of, oh, I posted this picture once, so I can never use it again. It's really not the case, you know, like, again, people are always online all the time. They're seeing so many things. They're not going to remember a picture that you posted 4 months ago or 1 year ago or 3 weeks ago, especially if you take the picture and you kind of recycle it or remix it in a cool way. So you could add design changes, you could add treatments, put filters, you could put a message on top, you could do some cut paste. Like, there's so many ways that you can use one picture in a lot of different ways to make sure that you're like maximizing that piece of content. So here we have some examples. So in the original picture, this earring was displayed on the e-commerce website. we wanted to kind of reuse it and do something cool for social. So we just cut it out, add some cool clouds and collage vibes on it. We put those, you know, gems, and then automatically your piece of content has been used in a new and very fresh way. And again, an audience will never recall that, oh, that's the same picture that they used on their website. An audience will never think that unless they're really cuckoo or something. I don't know. This is another example. So here we're repurposing pack shots. So product pack shots, how can you use them in a new and fresh way? Put them on a background, put a design behind it. Here we were using Arabic calligraphy. This was part of a Ramadan campaign we did with one of our clients, Tanagra. I'm sure you guys know them because they're in the Muse pop-up store. This was actually during Ramadan when it was COVID and we couldn't actually shoot a campaign. So we had to see what we could do with what we had. So we used a lot of their e-commerce pack shots in order to create some new and fresh artwork. And then here, for example, we had an image that was taken on a photo shoot and we wanted to recycle it and use it for a dynamic GIF. So here we kind of just cut her out, layered her, added some different background colors and filters, and all of a sudden we have a new piece of content that we can use. So make sure you keep everything. Either if you yourself can do it or partner with a designer and feed them with this library of content. And I'm sure you're going to be amazed by all of the different types of things that you can do with the same image, and recycle and reuse it as much as possible. Our second tip is sharing is caring. So collaboration is really key. So the more people you can partner with and collaborate with, the better. So if you're looking to produce a campaign, but you don't want to compromise on the quality, why not collaborate with other brands and you can kind of like split the production cost. So this way you can still go with the high production value, but at a lower cost. So here are some examples. So let's say if you're an apparel designer and you partner up with an accessories designer and a beauty brand, the three of you could come together and kind of shoot a campaign where all of your different brands are featured. So you could own the fashion, the accessories, and the beauty. And the three of you guys can partner together on creating this campaign, and all three brands can use these assets. It can also be interesting to kind of like, for example, here, if you're in beauty, you could crop into the face. If you're the accessories, again, you could have more of a close-up. For fashion, you could have the full look. So collaborating with other brands, of course, brands that are not like direct competitors. So if you're two fashion brands, it could be a little bit tricky. But if you're fashion, accessories, beauty, or fashion, and it could be shoes or clothes and bags, partner with different people and create a campaign together, share those costs, and use interesting kind of crops or angles to be able to share the content in a fair way where your brand is featured, but you're also supporting the other brand. So for example, here, this is a shoot where we had a fashion brand and makeup artists that were collaborating, as well as a location. So while doing the shoot, the location also wanted photography. So this is a way that we all collaborated together and shared all of the assets and either share the production. In this case, the location was just given for free instead of being part of the shoot, but we did give them assets after that that they could use for themselves. This is an example of that shoot. So here you can see how we featured the location. They had like this free climbing wall. For fashion, we have a more zoomed out where you see the full outfit. And then with beauty, we did a very nice close-up that the makeup artist can use for her portfolio. So this is a good example again of like a collaboration where everybody can kind of like maintain the look and feel that they want and the professionalism, but they can split the costs and use the assets with whatever objective they have. The third tip is to get creative. So you can use your phone to do a lot of really cool things. So finding the right apps are key to create your own content. So again, here I have a few apps, but I can definitely add more that we recommend to use. So testing out some of these apps definitely won't break the bank, but it would require some time and energy. So apps are a great way to create kind of like your always on content that's on a budget. You can do some really super cool things without having to have a full on production and photographer, videographer. There's a lot of things that you can do just from your phone. So some examples of what's kind of cool is like this glitchy kind of app does this really cool effect. When you look at the content, it's super dynamic and fun, but it's just taken from a phone with this app. You can also take photography and add some cool filters to it that makes it, again, more interesting and intriguing. You could be reusing a piece of content, for example, and adding this type of effect on it. You also have these cool ones, which is like the Kiri Kiri app. This is something that we love. If you have an item that has a lot of bling, you can kind of take a picture of it from your phone and it sparkles. This is great social content, and it also kind of displays unique parts of your product. And again, it's taken from a phone. It's actually way harder to achieve this in post-production than it is to just do it from a phone. So yeah, it's amazing the type of content you can make with this app. This is another really cool one. It's a VHS camcorder app. You know, a lot of this kind of like nostalgia 80s and 90s aesthetic is very in. So if you were creating content on a limited budget, you could for sure create an entire video campaign using this type of effect. And you could use another app to edit it. You could have your whole campaign video that was shot from an iPhone or any kind of smartphone, used with an interesting and cool app. And then something else that we love is to make memes. This is really great to make like custom memes for your brand. It's called the Memes Generator and Meme Creator app. We actually use this a lot with our clients as well, because you can make memes that look like real memes. And it's very fun to do them like specific to your brand. And you can do this, of course, straight from your phone. And this is the type of content for social that really is super engaging, especially if it's funny and on the ball and at the right time. You can create your own custom memes with messages that are from your brand super easily from an app like this. Our fourth tip is down to actually your big production moments. So when you are going to go into a shoot, you have one big idea, but think about all of the different types of outputs that you can have from that idea. So if you're investing in one key production moment, you really want to get as much output as you can. And so here planning is definitely key. You want to make sure that you have different formatted pieces of content. All of these things can come from one day. You just have to make sure that you kind of like plan out all of the different assets that you need prior to the shoot. So with the help of a small team, you can kind of execute a lot of different assets in the one day. And I'll show you this chart that kind of like shows you, okay, if you're doing a campaign shoot, if you're doing a photography shoot, you can have main campaign visuals, you can have product focused images, you can have behind the scenes images, you can be creating GIFs for social from your phone. You can think about doing interesting carousels that you can use for social. You can create collages out of the images, and you can also create specific content that is just from performance, all from the same shoot. When it comes to video, you can have your main campaign video, you can have campaign teasers or short bites. You could have videos that are very product focused. You could do something that's behind the scenes. You can have social snippets, maybe they're only 6 seconds. Those work really well for story ads. You can have, again, GIFs for social, and you can use a lot of the videography assets for performance posts on social. So if you were to have one campaign with both photography and videography, you could easily come out with 100 different type of assets. The idea is just to pre-plan So, okay, if you wanted to also cover some GIFs for social, which apps am I going to use? How am I going to make them look? All of this goes into like the planning stage so that when you are on set on your big campaign, either you or a couple of people who are working with you are assigned different type of tasks to make sure that you're getting as much content as possible. And of course, also in the editing and post-production phase, think about your one video and how many different videos you can make from that one clip. So here planning is key, and making sure you get the most out of it is really important, especially if you are working on a budget. And if you're investing in a big production moment, get as much as you can out of that one shoot. Any questions? No? Perfect. Amazing. Okay. So the last part that we have here is kind of like the workshop part. Did you guys want to take like a small break before we start, or should we just go directly into it?
Hey guys, you
Just
want
go
like
directly. No,
okay,
Break?
go for it, Jan. If you want.
I'm reach I'm reaching my work like in 15 minutes. I don't want no breaks.
Okay, so should we just keep moving?
Go for it.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Okay. So for the workshop, it's kind of going back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the call when we were looking at our brand platform document. So these are just some exercises and questions that can prompt the creation of your brand platform. So if everyone can have like a pen and paper or a notes on their computer or somewhere where they can just kind of be typing or writing, whichever one you prefer. Um, we'll just do some small exercises that kind of prompt questions that will help you clearly define what it is that you're trying to do. And then maybe offline, you guys can send us everything that you've worked on. You can either send it like directly after this meeting, or if you want to sit on it for a day or two, take your time, but send us all of the results, because these are things that we will use when we're building your content strategy. And if you like, we can also put them into like a document for you that you can use after the program is over. So yeah, everyone can just grab their writing utensils, typing or writing, whichever ones you prefer. And we will be sending you this document after so you can continue to work on it, because now we only have 35 minutes left. So some of the exercises will need a little bit more time, but at least we can just kind of start and get the juices flowing. So what are the objectives from this workshop that we'll be doing is to really define your brand and its values. So we'll be creating a word cloud, we'll be crafting a mission statement, we'll be defining what exactly our brand is, what our values are, and what is our personality. So the first thing we want to do is think of our word cloud. Here it says 10 minutes, but I'm just going to put 5 minutes on the stop clock. Basically, just in your notes, jot down as many words as you can think of that describes your brand. It can be a very random word. It could be something that doesn't even mean anything. Just any word that pops into your mind when you think about your brand, and you can just jot them down. So I'll give you guys 5 minutes starting now to start creating your word cloud. Okay, amazing. How was that, guys?
It was intense.
Yeah? Did a lot of
Yeah.
words come to mind?
Yeah, at the beginning it was so fast and easy, and then
You
the
slow down.
mind stops. Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's okay. That's good. Uh, that's good. I'm sure more will pop into your head. But honestly, like with this exercise, like nothing is really right or wrong. It's really just kind of helps you see visually all of the different words that are important to you. And it really helps when it comes to kind of defining your values, looking at which one of those words is important. If you're trying to craft statements, you always go back to those word clouds to see what are those key words for your brand and how you can use them. So it's a cool exercise. Um, okay, so the next one we have is creating a mission statement. So this is more of a dry way to do it, I would say, but it really helps very clearly define what you're doing. So we have this sentence structure that really helps in crafting the mission. So here you will use as a, and then you add your business or your brand description. We aim to provide, this is where you're inserting your key target audience. With is where you insert a subject matter or a theme. And then in order to is how kind of like, what is the outcome? How do you want to make your users feel? So I've made an example here. I don't know if you guys know, but we have an online website that we call the Modern East. And when we were looking at building the mission statement for our online magazine, this is what we came up with using this structure. So as an online media platform, we aim to provide young Arab millennials with entertaining, fun, and relevant content in order for them to find their voice and self-expression. So we use the sentence structure to kind of put together a mission statement. Once you have this mission statement, you can go ahead and kind of like tweak the structure, but it really helps kind of identifying those 4 key points in what are you, who are you talking to, um, why, and how do you want them to feel, or what is the outcome. So I'll give you guys another 5 minutes to try and insert some things that are relevant from your for your brand here. Okay, I started the clock. Okay, cool. That was 5 minutes. How was that? Was it hard for some of you or easy, or does anyone want to share? Hello. No one.
I guess we had to change some like wording and terms.
But at least it kind of got the wheels moving a little bit on how you can start structuring what your mission is, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, amazing. I guess maybe you guys can share it with me offline after. If you don't want to share it now, that's fine. Okay, so after our mission statement, sorry, we like to define what our brand is and what it's not. So here you can have kind of like two columns, or you can do it in a way where it's opposite. So my brand is sustainable, it is not mass market. These are kind of the sentences you can start thinking of, or you can do one column of what it is and what it isn't, that they don't have to be connected. So also for this, I'll give you guys 5 minutes to start jotting down some ideas of what your brand is and what your brand isn't. Okay, cool. That was 5 minutes. Did you guys enjoy this exercise?
Um, yeah, yeah. So for this part mainly, I think I have a question here. So it's easy for our brand to say what it is and what it's not, but I think our main issue would be portraying it to the consumer. So we've had trouble like trying to spread awareness
Yeah.
or trying to like portray or like trying to communicate with the consumer on why we are who we are.
Yeah. But see, this is very important. So now when you kind of have it like very clearly defined and we have it in a document, when we're preparing the content strategy, these are all things that can kind of like feed into perhaps the always on. So like, what are your unique selling points? What is interesting about your brand? What makes your brand different than the others? And how can we express it? So finding perhaps it's in a quote, maybe every 2 weeks you launch a quote that talks a little bit about what your brand is doing that's different than others. Maybe it could be a way of like labeling. So for example, if you have a pack shot of your product, maybe you can have like a thin line with like a word next to it that describes what makes this unique, like what are the USPs. So this is something that we do with a lot of brands. It's within captions, it's within the creative, but taking all of those important things of what your brand is and what sets it apart and finding creative ways to express it. And for most brands, they actually have a lot of really cool, unique selling points and they have really cool stories. So that's more than half of the job done. Now it's just finding recipes and visual ways that you can express those. And these are things that we can define in the content strategy that you can kind of use as always on content. You kind of have these templates that maybe you use on a regular basis, but with different subjects and with different phrases or points that you can cover. So this is something we'll help you with.
For
Okay,
me, this was
amazing.
the hardest to achieve.
Really?
This exercise, yeah. I don't know. I don't. I think I don't know my brand. That's sad.
Well, this is good if it's kind of like prompting questions for you to ask yourself, because these parts are very important to have kind of like defined so that it's clear not only for you as the designer or for your team who are working for your brand, but then also like communicating it to your audience. So right now we're having like 5-minute timelines on all of the exercises, which is very short. Typically, when we do these brand discovery workshops, we would do it collectively. So we would have usually 2 or 3 people from the brand. We would have 2 or 3 people from our own team. We would also have maybe some marketing experts or friends of the brands or consumers. And we all do these exercises together and share answers. So right now we're doing it in a way where it's a solo project, but I would definitely encourage all of you guys to take these questions and maybe have a brainstorming session either with your team or with friends or with people who you think can kind of like add value, and go through this exercise with them. Get some post-its out, sit in a cafe or go into like a co-working space and spend half a day maybe like really digging through. It's also very interesting when you have different perspectives of how people perceive your brand versus how you perceive your brand. And we kind of use all of these results to create the official brand platform. So no worries. The pressure is probably on right now because we're kind of flying through it, but I would definitely encourage all of you guys to do these exercises in groups and in teams and more as a brainstorm, because you'll probably uncover a lot of interesting things that comes from different perspectives. So yeah. Okay, the next one is, see, we only have 10 minutes left. Okay, so I'm just going to sift through it quickly. But the next one is defining what your brand values are. So having brand values are very important. It's kind of like as a person as well as a human, we kind of have values that have either been instilled in us from when we were children, or it's values that we learn about as we grow older. But like, what are these important pillars that kind of guide us? What are important to us? And when we're looking at it from a brand perspective, I always recommend to have 4 values. I think 2 of the values can touch more on emotion and feeling, And the other two can be something that is maybe more concrete. So when we look at like a concrete value, it could be something like sustainability. So sustainability is like a core value in your brand. When it comes to the execution of your fashion pieces, sustainability is at the forefront of your decision making. And then it also could be inclusivity. So inclusivity is something that touches more upon human feelings. You want people to feel like this brand is inclusive of all different people, the feeling that you get when you're associated to this brand of inclusivity. So these are the different types of values you can have. I always recommend to have 2 concrete ones and 2 that are more on the emotional side, having 4 key values. And what do those 4 values mean? And when you choose those values, you don't want them to be kind of like empty promises. So if you're saying sustainability, you really are claiming that this is something that your brand stands by, which leads to a lot of decision making. So it's not about picking like fluffy words, or if something is trending, you want to go in that direction. It's really if this is what your brand stands for and this is what your brand is doing. So maybe a lot of the values or the thought process behind them can already start from your word cloud. You can see what are some important things connected to your brand, and you can use these to kind of define your values. So here, we won't do the exercise because we only have 10 minutes left, but I'll kind of leave it with you guys to think about defining what those 4 values are and what they mean to you and your brand, and how can we kind of elaborate on them. And then the last exercise we have, which is a very fun exercise, again, like you guys can do this offline. Maybe you can do it if you have this brainstorming session with your team or your friends, is defining your personality. So a brand personality is also really important. Your tone of voice, how you express yourself. Are you a brand that communicates in a very serious way, or are you very fun and jokey? Do you have a specific wit? What is the personality behind your brand? And the best way that you can do this is kind of like personifying your brand. So if your brand were a person, so you can imagine if your brand was a person and you just showed up to an industry party. So if you were at for example, the Muse party that was happening a couple of days ago, if your brand was a person and it's in a room full of your ideal competitors, but also your customers, how would this person be? What would they wear? What would he or she be like? How would he or she approach people? What would they say? So you kind of like write down as many attributes as you can about this person. How do they show themselves? Are they the loudest one in the room and they're wearing a crazy outfit? Or are they more subdued and intelligent, soft-spoken? So kind of like personifying your brand, even though it's an exercise that maybe seems a little bit funny or far-fetched, it actually really helps when it comes to communication. So when you're looking at writing captions or having marketing text or describing your collection, when it comes to the way that your brand looks, is it loud and crazy or is it more reserved? So all of these like personality attributes that you can think of this person at a party can help you see like how does your brand express himself or herself, or maybe it doesn't have a sex because it's a brand, but like, you know what I mean? How do you present your brand? What's the personality behind it? So this is a really fun exercise. It's also fun to do it in a group and everyone answers different things. And most of the time, a good sign of a successful brand is when you're doing these exercises and a lot of the answers are similar, but then you also find some quirks or some differences that are an interesting new perspective. So again, I encourage all of you guys to take this back with you. If you can not do it solo, I would do it in a group so that you can get all of that information and really start brainstorming and defining all of those key points. And then when you have all of those notes ready, or when you've done these exercises, this is when you can put everything together in a brand platform. And this really helps in a lot of different things. If you have a sales deck or if you have a pitch presentation, You can always have like your mission statement is there, it's bold, it's been thought through. This is what your mission as a brand is. What are your values? What's important to you in your brand? What makes you guys different? So all of these kind of like exercises, once you put it together into a presentation, into a brand platform, you can use this for so many different things. You can also use it internally. So when someone new joins your team and you need them to understand your brand essence, you take them through these documents. So I'll leave you guys. We have like 5 or 10 minutes left. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but I know that we're short on time, so we won't do the exercise now. But again, you can take them back and do it with your friends or team. And then whenever you can, send us your results so that we can use this to kind of kickstart your content strategies and helping you put together this document of a brand platform. Does anyone have any questions or comments or feedbacks or anything? Because we have a few minutes left to wrap it up.
Don't be shy, guys.
When are you expecting us to share with us with you our answers and stuff?
It's up to you. I think sometime next week would be great.
Okay. When you guys will be able to share the presentation for this, so I actually can go read it, because honestly, my brain is not working properly. I can't.
This was a lot of information. We'll be able to share this with you now. I will package the presentation and I'll share it with Rafi so you guys can go through all of this.
Awesome.
Yeah, don't worry. And there's no rush, but I think if you have everything ready by same time next week, that would be great. Just to give you guys an idea of what we're working on in parallel. After our one-on-one conversations with all of you guys, we kind of came back together as a team to understand how we can help each one of your brands and what kind of content we can create, because as you know, part of your program is to have an envelope that you spend with us on content creation and consulting and this kind of stuff. So with each one of you, we will be working on a content strategy collaboratively with you guys to kind of help you get started. And then at the same time, we're going to be creating pieces of content that will give you guys, but also the Fashion Lab will be using to kind of express what your brand is and kind of talk more about you as an entrepreneur. So actually the shoot that we had planned happened earlier, because usually we would present to you what we want to do and then do it. But because of timing and you guys were all in the store at the same time, you guys did do your interviews and your voiceovers and we got a lot of footage. So this is all of the content that we'll be using to create these video and content pieces for you. However, of course, they're going to have a specific look and feel and a quirk to them. And each one of your guys's videos will be specific to your brand. So we are actually just wrapping up creating the mood boards and kind of like the plans that we have for each one of you. So separately, we'll be in touch with all of you with kind of our proposal of what we want to create for you. And then we will start executing early next week with all of this. So that's kind of just what to expect. And yeah, we're so excited to be working with all of you guys. And of course, we'll share this document with you so you can review and look back. And if you can do the workshops, it would be great to get your feedback and your answers by next week.
I have a simple like a question that I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Should I wait for our next one-on-one session to discuss some branding decision that I'm planning to take, or should I reach out to plan another meeting for that?
At any time you want. I'm available via email or Slack or whatever, whenever you need. If you have any questions,
Okay.
don't be shy.
Thank you.
Don't be a shy guy. Okay. Anyone else? Wow, look at that. Perfect timing.
Right on the money.
Well, I hope that you guys enjoyed. I hope that I didn't talk everyone's ear off. I'm bored of hearing my own voice at this point. So thank you all for like.
So fun. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you for the
That
great
was
knowledge.
great.
Very informative. Thank you so much.
Thank
Anytime.
you.
Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, guys.
So this will wrap this session up. Obviously, as Danielle said, we'll be ready. We'll be producing a lot of content on your behalf. The team will be in touch with you for a lot of fun stuff in the general sense of content. So tomorrow is going to be also a super interesting session, as you guys know, with Facebook. So really appreciate that you guys always been on time. Tomorrow is going to be probably the same. Really great session. And next week we dive into 5 other different subjects they're going to be also super interesting with really cool people to lead them. Yeah, that about wraps it up. Does anybody have any questions for me or Sinead that you wanted to ask, or are you guys, do you all need a bit of a break from this 2-hour marathon that we just ran through on content and branding?
I don't mind waiting for 2 more minutes.
What's up? I didn't catch that. Sorry, Mo.
I was saying I don't mind waiting for another 2 minutes.
Okay. Cool. All right, guys. Well, I will see you tomorrow, same time, and enjoy the rest of your, what is it today? Tuesday. So I'll catch you guys tomorrow.
Thank you,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.
Bye. Have a great day.
See you.
Bye.
Ciao, guys.
Thanks for your patience.
Bye, guys.
Ciao.